Hey guys, Steve Gutowski back here again on SHOT Show's convention floor. We're in the media room. We're doing a lot of stuff in the media room.
It's not really the convention floor, by the way.
Yeah, the floor's that way. It's a whole thing. It's huge. Anyway, the important thing is that we're here with Adam Kraut, who is one of the attorneys representing the Firearms Policy Coalition in their lawsuit against the Trump administration's bump stock ban.
Yes.
Right? And so, can you give us a little bit of background about this lawsuit? Why did you file it? What are you hoping to achieve?
Sure. So, for those that don't know, the ATF, or Department of Justice, published a regulation that amended the definition of machine gun to specifically, among other things, include bump stocks in that definition, essentially outlawing them. There's a 90-day, assuming court doesn't take any action, a 90-day grace period for people to destroy or get rid of their bump stocks, and then I believe the date off the top of my head, March 26th, they become contraband, or same as having a illegal machine gun in your home.
Right, which is a felony, correct?
Yes, yeah, up to $250,000 or 10 years imprisonment, or both. So the way this came about was there was a notice of proposed rulemaking or last year sometime. Firearms Policy Coalition approached us, and as did Firearms Policy Foundation, about drafting a comment in opposition to the proposed rulemaking, which we did for them. And at that time we discussed the possibility that if they do in fact publish a final regulation, bringing a suit against them. So when that happened, we discussed it some more, and we ended up filing a suit on their behalf.
And so specifically, if you're successful in this suit, what happens?
So, good question. So, right now we have a motion for preliminary injunction that is going to have a hearing February 6th. If the court grants the injunction, it would merely delay the implementation of that regulation until the court decides the case on the underlying merits. If the court finds in our favor on the underlying merits, it's likely the government would appeal. Likewise, there's probably a pretty good chance that if they find against us, we'll appeal to the circuit court down there in the District of Columbia. Essentially, at the end of the day, regardless at what level, assuming the Supreme Court doesn't want to hear it, if a finding happens to be in the favor of Firearms Policy Coalition and the other plaintiffs, then at that point in time, the regulation would be null and void. If the finding is in the government's favor, then obviously that is in effect and would create a...
What's the timetable for something like this, you think?
Litigation can take years. Yeah, I mean, district court, it depends how quickly the district court disposes of the issues. We have an expedited briefing schedule for the preliminary injunction, but that's only preliminary injunction. It's possible that we're found against and succeed on the underlying merits themselves.
So right now, the preliminary injunction is fairly important because if you get that, while the litigation continues, the regulation won't go into effect and bump stocks will remain legal.
During that time period, yeah.
During litigation.
Correct.
But if you don't get the preliminary injunction, even though you might continue litigation,
and
the regulation would go into effect.
Yeah. So preliminary injunction, if granted, would kind of pause everything for that case to go forward and be heard on the underlying merits, and the judge would then rule as to whether or not that regulation is lawful or unlawful. During it, if there were an appeal, it's possible that if it found in the favor of us, we could enter into an agreement with the government to stay the implementation of the regulation during the appeal process, so that way the status quo remains the same. If the preliminary injunction doesn't happen, then what would happen is that regulation goes into effect the date it's supposed to, and ultimately, if the court finds in our favor, it would turn everything back, theoretically, assuming that there isn't a stay agreed to upon an appeal.
But in that time period...
In that time period, yes. So, if the
subject to prosecution potentially.
Simply put, injunction would prevent anything from happening until it's all done. Not then it would be illegal.
So it's a very important.
It's something that we hope to achieve.
Coming up at the beginning of next month.
Yes. Yeah, there's a hearing at the beginning of next month. Yeah, very soon.
And now, as far as this whole case is concerned, what is your motivation? There's obviously an argument out there like bump stocks. Nobody cares, right? Sure. Maybe a few thousand people have these things. They're just for fun, really.
It's more than a few thousand, but
maybe it's more than that. But it's not a massive chunk of the gun-owning population. And so people say, and they were obviously used in the Vegas, shooting.
Right.
That may be the only crime that we're aware of at this point, but it was obviously a very significant crime with a lot of people dead. So why should people care about bump stocks? Why should we fight this in court? What is your rationale?
So our biggest thing with it was the executive overreach. This wasn't done through Congress. If you look at the plain statutory language of what a machine gun is,
Right.
by our interpretation of it, bump stocks clearly fall outside of that. And our argument even goes to that you look at the amended definition that they have, and they've now specifically included bump stocks in it. So it kind of is almost an admission that, yeah, it wasn't covered under this, but now we're making it very clear that it should be.
Because what is the actual definition under the statute? It's like it's a
it has,
single pull the trigger. Has to
fires more than one round per single pull of the trigger. Frames receiver of any such weapon, and that's not how
bump stocks work.
We even did for the comment. We did a slow motion video in conjunction with the Gun Collective, where I also do media stuff, where we filmed the operation of a bump stock in high speed and showed that it was more than one pull of the trigger per round fired. So. Or rather, single round fired pull per single pull.
Every pull of every action on
getting
the trigger
tongue tied, but you get one round per pull.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which is really not what a machine gun is.
It's not what a machine gun is.
You know, one of the things that I asked the ATF when I spoke to them when they announced this regulation is, you know, it seems to me that the logic they're using to say that bump stocks are machine guns under the statutory definition is this idea that it's creates this cycle,
right?
It utilizes the recoil of the firearm, you know, expelling a cartridge to continue the firing cycle,
right?
And so bump stocks do this, and it's what I didn't really understand about their explanation for this is how that wouldn't just apply to just bump firing, because you don't need a bump stock necessarily, and like it just seems there's
a lot.
It's a very expansive interpretation of what machine gun means, right?
Right.
Of what a single pull of the trigger, expelling multiple rounds, what that means, and it feels to me like that. Now they kept saying this only applies to bump stocks and does not apply to anything else at all. That was their assurance, essentially. But I just don't understand how that couldn't be used going forward to redefine all sorts of things as machine guns.
There's a lot of logical disconnects in the reasoning of how they got from A to B, and it really seems that it was almost as if this is the result you need to get to, figure out how to kind of get there.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been attacking them on, inconsistencies, even in the final rule that they published. And you'll see all that, you know, in the court documents that we filed as far as briefs and in the complaint, us pointing out, you know, here they say this, here they say that. Those two don't jive together, and it's within the same document. It's not even, we're talking, you know, it was published 5 years ago and then 2 years ago. This is, you know, a consistent, uniform.
Right. And so if you could distill for us, and this might be hard to do, but if you could distill for us your basic argument, the main argument.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
In like 5 seconds.
Sure.
What's the basic argument for why this regulation is illegal or shouldn't stand?
Sure. So the main arguments that we're making have to do with APA violations, so Administrative Procedures Act, plain statutory language, takings clauses. And there were one or two off the top of my head that I honestly don't recall. And there was also then the Whitaker issue that was raised as far as the
acting attorney
whether he has the authority to actually implement a regulation.
So you really have a number of different avenues for why you think this regulation shouldn't stand.
Correct.
It's not just one.
It's not just one count. There's a number of different counts that we've brought, and we brought them because we think that all of them have merit to actually being argued.
Okay. Great, and so the hearing's coming up February 6th.
For the preliminary injunction, yes.
And so you're going to let us know what happens.
Absolutely, yeah, I will certainly send you an email.
And we'll let you guys know what happens as well, because it's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
It will affect a lot of people, even people who don't own bump stocks necessarily. So,
yes.
All right, well, great. We'll keep following you. We'll
Thank you.
And your fashion choices as well. We got, what is Grateful Dead holding a bump stock?
Yeah.
What's this guy called?
The Dancing Bear.
The Dancing Bear. So I guess it's cool. It's sort of a countercultural thing there.
I'm also a deadhead, so admittedly.
All right. Well, we appreciate you spending a little time talking with us, explaining the lawsuit. because I know a lot of people care about what's going on
Yeah.
with this. So you guys stay tuned, and we will bring you more from here from SHOT Show 2019.